Nah, everybody cool. Everybody cool. Bro, that's what I'm saying.
Going into that 90-day bid, he was not bracing for a fight. He was unbothered in the specific way that only comes from having done it before and come out intact.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to say, I'm going to prison with that same mentality. I'm good. The day I'm supposed to die or something bad supposed to happen, God already got it written. So like, I'm not walking with no fear. When you walk with the Almighty, you walk confident.
Happened on top of it, that kind of put like the cherry on top.
So when 6ix9ine was on Dell's project, Dell's FaceTime me and let me talk to 6ix9ine. And 6ix9ine was explaining this situation to me.
I don't know what could happen when I exit that mall, so I don't regret nothing because I will do it again.
On April 3rd, 2026, Daniel Hernandez walked out of the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn holding a SpongeBob doll signed by Nicolas Maduro and wearing a $2 million chain, and many people immediately said trouble was waiting for him. This came after he served 90 days, or 3 months, for several supervised release violations, including 2 failed drug tests for methamphetamine, and an authorized trip to Las Vegas, arriving an hour late to court, a March 2025 raid on his Florida home that found cocaine and MDMA, and an August 2025 mall incident where he attacked a man who called him a snitch to his face. He had turned himself in on January 6, 2026, during a live stream with streamer Adam Ross, and when he got out, he reportedly left a day early, posted celebratory content, received a custom chain worth about $2.2 million, and returned to life as if those 90 days were just a short break. Still, no one confronted him, and no violence broke out. This was not the first time people predicted he would not make it out safely, and it was not the first time they were wrong. To understand how 6ix9ine reached April 2026 in one piece, you have to go back to where the story really began. It did not start with the federal case or his cooperation. It started in Brooklyn in 2017, with a rapper nobody in New York really knew yet and a music video that changed everything. Daniel Hernandez grew up in Bushwick, Brooklyn, with a Puerto Rican father and a Mexican mother. He moved through school, church, and a neighborhood where street life was hard to avoid, and by his teenage years he had dropped out of school, started selling weed to survive, and began trying music. He worked in a bodega, had no money or industry connections, and relied on the internet instead. Then in 2017, he posted a photo with rainbow hair, a grill, face tattoos, including a big 6ix9ine, and an expression that dared anyone to say something about it. The post went viral and quickly became a meme. In November of that year, he dropped Gumo, a track produced by Pyera Born, filmed in Brooklyn with members of the 9 Trey Gangsta Bloods standing right in the frame. The song shot up to number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 and earned a platinum certification by March 2018. By February 2018, his debut mixtape, Day 69, landed at number 4 on the Billboard 200. In just about 4 months, he'd gone from working in a bodega to staring down a top 5 debut on one of the biggest charts in music. And the crew in those videos wasn't just for show. By late 2017, Hernandez had linked up with the 9 Trey Gangsta Bloods through his manager, Kefano Shotty Jordan. He'd later lay it all out under oath. The gang gave him street credibility, protection, and bodies in his videos. In return, he gave them money. He helped finance their operations, pay for weapons, and even brokered a heroin deal in Bushwick. They were his street armor. He was their walking ATM. It was a straight-up business, not a brotherhood. That deal ended on November 18, 2018, when federal agents from the ATF, NYPD, and Homeland Security arrested Hernandez alongside 5 associates on charges of racketeering, conspiracy, firearms offenses, attempted murder, and narcotics trafficking. He was staring down a mandatory minimum of 47 years. He walked into court and pleaded not guilty. On paper, he was innocent. In reality, he was guilty of everything. 6 days after the arrest, on January 23, 2019, he flipped. He changed his plea to guilty on all 9 counts, signed a cooperation agreement, and agreed to testify against the very people he'd spent 2 years calling his brothers in interviews and on record. He was sentenced on December 18, 2019. He got 2 years, credited with the 13 months he'd already spent in jail before trial, plus 5 years of supervised release and community service. By April 2020, he was let out on home confinement because of the COVID-19 pandemic and health concerns tied to his asthma. A lot of people on the street said he wouldn't survive prison, or at least not what came after. He didn't vanish. He went straight to Instagram Live on his birthday, May 8, 2020, and pulled in over 2 million people watching at the same time. Soon after, he dropped Gooba, which smashed YouTube records for a hip-hop debut by racking up more than 43 million views in 24 hours. He didn't hide. He didn't flee the country. He didn't disappear into witness protection. Instead, he turned the whole thing into content. When Los Angeles started paying people to snitch on businesses that broke the COVID stay-at-home orders, 6ix9ine clowned the system on the comments section. He replied under a Shade Room post about it, then escalated. In his Instagram bio, he wrote, "WHY everybody calling me a snitch? Am I missing something?" He even changed his profile picture to a cartoon of himself sitting in a rat trap, eating cheese. He was leaning into the label, not running from it. Fast forward to October 2024, when he surrendered again for supervised 2 positive meth tests and an unauthorized trip to Las Vegas. He did 45 days. He got out. Nothing major happened. Then, in January 2026, he self-surrendered again for more assault and more drug-related issues. He did 90 days. He walked out again, unscathed. Vlad TV asked him straight up during the run-up to that final January 2026 surrender whether being known as a cooperator made people come at him differently inside. His answer: never had no problems. Thank God. Nah, everybody cool. Everybody, bro, that's what I'm saying. Walking into that 90-day stint, he wasn't bracing for a fight. He was calm in the way only someone who's done this loop before and made it back in one piece can be. So, in his own words, he wasn't walking in fear. When you walk with the Almighty, he says, you walk with confidence. He served the full 90 days and walked out on April 3, 2026. Nobody jumped him. Nobody ended him. On paper, that's the part that doesn't make sense, because by every rule the street claims to live by, it should have happened. That's the real question the story raises, not whether it happened, but why it didn't. To get that, you have to understand exactly what he did in that courtroom. What Tekashi 6ix9ine handed over to the federal government wasn't just snitching or a quick interview. It was a full-scale forensic breakdown of an entire criminal organization, delivered from the inside by the person who had bankrolled it. Prosecutors themselves called it extraordinary in their own court filings. The case was United States versus Jones et al., the federal racketeering prosecution of the 9 Trey gangster bloods in the Southern District of New York. On November 18, 2018, agents from the ATF, NYPD, and Homeland Security launched a coordinated takedown and arrested Hernandez along with 5 associates. The next day, the indictment dropped, charging them with racketeering, conspiracy, firearms offenses, attempted murder, and narcotics trafficking. For Hernandez, the exposure was brutal. Mandatory minimums on the gun charges alone stretched into decades. Add everything together, and he was staring at a sentence that looked like life. His first move? He pleaded not guilty. But 66 days later, on January 23, 2019, he flipped. He changed his plea to guilty on all 9 counts, admitted to being a member of the 9 Trey gangsters, and stepped into a cooperation agreement of insane depth. He didn't just say, "Yeah, I'm in the gang." He rebuilt the whole 9 Trey command structure from memory. He laid out who held which rank, how the prison lineup worked, who retained power from behind bars, and how it ran separately from the street lineup. He explained who had the authority to greenlight violence, how Jews were collected, and how meetings were run. He named Jamal Murder Jones as the street godfather and placed his own manager, Shotty, as Big 020, the second highest street rank. He plugged in other members by rank and function into a hierarchy law enforcement had been trying to map for years. Then, over 3 straight days of testimony in September 2019, he went further. Under oath, he walked through specific crimes he'd financed, ordered, or taken part in. He admitted paying somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 to have Chief Keef shot at outside the West Hotel in Times Square in June 2018, money he said was meant to boost his status in the gang. He confessed to being involved in an armed robbery on West 40th Street in Manhattan in April 2018. He admitted to agreeing to sell a kilo of heroin in Bushwick in 2017. He tied himself to the April 2018 Barclays Center shooting, which was linked to his public feud with Kodak Black. He explained, in brutal detail, how the gang decided when and where to use violence and how it got carried out. And when it came to his own role, he didn't paper it over. He was blunt. He joined the gang because of what it gave him: street credibility, protection, clout, and a certain energy for his music. For a while, it worked both ways. He got the image he needed, and they got the money. But in that courtroom, he turned that whole arrangement inside out. And that's exactly why, when he walked out again on April 3, 2026, nobody touched him. "What's your definition of a snitch?" they asked. He answered without hesitation. A snitch is somebody who'd do absolutely anything to get out of a situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, a snitch would face some hard moment and just give up their mother, their brother, everybody. He drew a clear line between that image and what he actually did. In his telling, he wasn't betraying innocent people. He was testifying against guys who, from his point of view, had robbed him at gunpoint, stolen from his money, slept with his child's mother, and even talked about killing him on a federal wiretap. Whether you buy that logic or not, it was the line he kept returning to every time someone called him a snitch. The real proof of how much damage he caused showed up in the sentences of the people he helped put away. Anthony Harver Lisson, the man who kidnapped and pistol-whipped 6ix9ine in July 2018, forced him into a stolen car at gunpoint, beat him, and even recorded it, was convicted and sentenced to 24 years in federal prison. Algeria Nuke Mac got around 17 years on racketeering and narcotics charges. Mel Murder, Ish, Crippy, and Q2B all pleaded guilty to charges that carried multi-year sentences. And Shotty, his manager, his closest associate, the guy who sat in his home while he was touring and whose phone held the messages that confirmed everything, got 15 years. When Vlad TV asked him how it felt knowing Shotty got 15, he didn't hesitate or show regret. This wasn't the stance of someone torn up inside. It was the stance of someone who had built a tight story for himself, stepped into it fully, and decided to live in it instead of apologizing for it. Vlad then asked the question that hovered over the whole era, one that his critics had never really answered either. The cultural backlash was fast and total. Snoop Dogg posted memes. Meek Mill publicly condemned him. Future, 50 Cent, Boosie, and Vince Staples all weighed in. Diss tracks dropped. Radio play dried up. Clubs and venues that once booked him started banning him. Podcasts, Instagram pages, and YouTube channels all spoke in chorus. His time on the outside would be short. The streets would do what the courts hadn't. In 2023, someone tried. 3 men attacked 6ix9ine in the sauna of a fitness gym in Palm Beach County, Florida. He ended up hospitalized. 3 suspects were arrested. The attack made headlines and, for a moment, it looked like the prophecy had finally come true. He recovered, sued the gym, and kept trolling. In August 2025, a man at a South Florida mall called him a snitch to his face. 6ix9ine attacked him, breaking the terms of his supervised release and triggering the legal chain that ended in his January 2026 surrender. When Vlad asked him about it, he didn't apologize. He turned it into another piece of his defense, and then this happened on top of it, that kind of put like the cherry on top. 6ix9ine was on this project, FaceTimed me, let me talk to her, let her explain the situation. I don't know what could have happened when I walked out that mall. So I don't regret nothing, because I'd do it again. Every one of those moments, the gym attack, the mall confrontation, the diss tracks, the club run INS, was real. None of them exploded the second he walked out of jail. They were scattered across years, stitched together with long stretches of calm. And not one of them delivered the final, clean, street-approved outcome that everybody had been promising. That's the real question no diss track or podcast ever fully answered. If the streets were really coming for him, why hasn't that ending ever fully landed? Why didn't anyone move? Why was 6ix9ine never smoked? Neither at his 2020 exit from federal prison, nor at his 2024 release after a supervised release violation, nor when he walked out of MDC Brooklyn on April 3, 2026. That question tears apart one of hip-hop's most stubborn myths. The idea that the streets enforce their own laws with iron consistency, that snitching triggers a fixed, automatic punishment, and that no amount of fame or money can protect a man from the sentence his peers have supposedly already passed on him. The truth turns out to be messier and far more revealing than the myth. In 2020, while artists and commentators were loudly declaring that 6ix9ine was finished, that he'd never be safe in public again, a group of men from a Brooklyn neighborhood did something that cracked the whole narrative wide open. They brought him to the hood and let him shoot a music video in their projects. When footage from that session surfaced on a podcast hosted by Hassan Campbell, one of the men who'd helped arrange it started explaining why, and in the process dropped a single line that cut through years of online posturing. He said something like, "We brought this nigga to the hood. First of all, please don't hop. Please don't. Please don't. Nobody." Others in the room pushed back, but he kept going. His point wasn't about defending 6ix9ine or excusing snitching. It was about defending consistency in the code. He talked about the rats in his own neighborhood, older guys everyone on the block knew had cooperated with law enforcement years, even decades ago, who were still around, still greeted, still getting the basic courtesy of being left alone. Men who walked free because they were embedded in the community, because they were useful, because they had money or connections that made addressing their past cooperation inconvenient. Really give him a 5 if he outside like his chilling regular, he said. You feel me? Like this is regular. So what? Don't act like I did something wrong now. His argument wasn't moral. It was observational. The so-called code that promised automatic punishment for cooperation was already full of loopholes. Those loopholes ran along lines of money, longevity, and relationships, not along what the man had actually done. The backlash against 6ix9ine was louder and more sustained than anything aimed at those neighborhood figures, but the underlying principle was the same. The rules bend where power and utility are strong enough. He named it plainly, selective politicking. The same act, cooperation, had different consequences depending on who you were and what you represented financially. An old head on the block who flipped years ago and later became a neighborhood fixture got tolerance. A rainbow-haired internet millionaire who testified live in federal court got endless hate. The core variable was never the act itself. It was the visibility, and underneath that, always, the bag. Money and attention shaped everything about 6ix9ine's life after prison. The men who brought him into the hood weren't signaling loyalty to informants. They were doing it because it brought eyes, because being tied to 6ix9ine, even in a toxic way, generated views, clout, and, very often, some kind of payment. When someone asked directly, if there was zero money attached, would you still have let him come shoot the video? One of them answered without blinking, yo, let's just pull up to the, if I want to. If I want to. That's how real it is. In other words, the choice wasn't about justice, honor, or street law. It was about power, exposure, and profit. And that's exactly why nobody moved. That's what I'm telling y'all, he said. If I want to, that's what I'm going to do. Whatever I want, I could do. On the surface, the line sounded like pure freedom, like a guy claiming total control over his choices. But it was spoken in a room soaked in the reality of what 6ix9ine's name was worth. Everyone there knew the figure attached to that brand, and nobody was pretending otherwise. Kodak Black took $1 million to do a song with him. Other artists who had publicly called him untouchable still quietly took meetings. Some refused, but not because of some strong moral line, as Lil Woody pointed out. They were just too worried about how it would look to their fans. Kodak Black took $1 million to do a song with 6ix9ine, Woody said. Everybody else mad cause 6ix9ine ain't coming to them with that same offer. The issue wasn't purity. It was optics and opportunity. Woody had actually spoken to 6ix9ine during the loudest stretch of street talk about consequences. His message wasn't hype or encouragement. It was clarity. The label snitch was permanent. No amount of violence, no show of dominance, no street hit could erase it. In Woody's view, the whole idea that you could restore honor by retaliating against a snitch was built on a foundation that had already collapsed. You know what it's like, he said. You know how easy it is to get caught up in some shit. When they say you're a snitch, you should laugh at them and go on with your way. Let's say you kill him. He's still going to be called a snitch. You're still going to be called it. There was no violent act that could fix the core problem. The snitching wasn't just rumor. It was filed, stamped, and preserved in the public record of the U.S. federal court system. It was quoted in the New York Times. It lived in the indictment, the 5K 1.1 letter, the detailed transcript breakdowns, and the pretrial summaries dissected by outlets like Revolt. It was permanent in a way that street violence simply couldn't touch. You couldn't unsnitch your way out of a federal court record. 6ix9ine seemed to grasp that earlier than most of his critics did, and instead of drowning in remorse, he did something else. He absorbed it, reframed it, and eventually turned it into a weapon. He explained his path to cooperation on Angie Martinez's I'm Hot segment, laying it out as a timeline stripped of myth and hype. A kidnapping in July 2018. A federal wiretap that revealed his manager was sleeping with his child's mother. A meeting with the FBI in November 2017, where he volunteered that he was ready to cooperate before he was even formally arrested. By the time he sat at the cooperation table, the betrayals had already been so complete and so documented that, in his telling, it wasn't a choice between loyalty and survival. It was the realization that the loyalty he thought he had never really existed. I knew what I was signing up for, he said. I knew everything. I knew the guys I was rolling with, right? What I thought I knew, right? The condition, the unspoken bargain of silence and loyalty, had never been met. The guys he trusted weren't loyal. And in that same interview, After walking through every date and every betrayal in sequence, he landed on a conclusion he'd clearly been carrying for years. God used me going to jail to clean my whole circle. It was all, he said. God cut my grass so I could see the snakes in it. Whether that line is spiritual truth, calculated performance, or some mix of both, it produced something the streets couldn't really crack. A man who refused to carry the shame for people who had already treated him as disposable. He could not be smoked by shame, because he didn't buy into the idea that his actions required it. In his mind, he hadn't crossed some moral line. He had just survived the fall of a circle that had already failed him. The man in that Brooklyn video, the one who claimed he'd been around for 33 years, had watched the selective application of street rules his whole adult life. I've been apart 33 years, right, he said. So I've seen it. I've seen selective politicking. I've seen the guy who got all the money, who told on everybody, pull up and everybody just looked the other way. For 3 decades, he had watched the same pattern repeat. The rich man who flipped walked free. The broke man who flipped got dealt with. The enforcement was never really about the act of snitching. It was about the power, the money, the utility attached to the person who did it. When 6ix9ine walked out of MDC Brooklyn on April 3, 2026, he did it with a $2.2 million chain and a SpongeBob doll tucked under his arm. Aiden Ross had live-streamed the whole surrender. The promo machine was already spinning. No crowd waited outside. No cars circled. No one rushed up on him in the days that followed. The same guys who had once brought him into their projects to shoot a video, no security, no real protection, just raw exposure, had already shown exactly what that 33-year veteran was talking about. The streets didn't smoke him because a much older pattern had already kicked in, selective politicking. That pattern predates 6ix9ine and will outlive him. It runs through every city where the street code claims to rule. In an economy built on attention, that pattern made him functionally untouchable. The bag protected him. The trolling protected him. And the cold, clear willingness to say on camera, in front of millions, I did what I did. I don't regret it, protected him, too. Not because it was morally right. Not because the streets agreed with it. But because a man who will not accept the verdict cannot be truly sentenced by it.